Herzlich willkommen, liebe Zuschauer. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Königssee, the oldest artificial sliding track on the planet. We're at Königssee in Bavaria, and the snow continues to fall as we get ready for the second and deciding heat of our 7th women's bobsleigh race of the season. Hello, everybody. Martin Haven, and alongside me, Olympic champion brakeman Kurt Tomasevich. Well, Kurt, what a mixed-up field we got. Some of the faster starters way down the order, some of the slower starters right up at the sharp end.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said for this. You know, we're not sure if it's the snow that's falling, if it's, you know, great lines, great driving, whatever it is, but you know, different drivers are from all over the place. You know, Kathleen Martini going down the track, you can tell right now, had a pretty great line, you know, crosses the line, and you know, she's in pretty good position to do well. But you know, so a lot of other drivers as well. This is one of our surprises. Spani from the Swiss team. Wow, you know, her starts, a 5th ranked start, drives her way into 2nd place. Not something we're used to.
Yeah, Caroline Spani, double junior world champion as a brakewoman, behind 2 other Swiss pilots, and now really setting the world alight here in Königssee, Bavaria. And perhaps no real surprise at who's on top of the pile. She didn't win last week in Altenburg. That was the first time in over 12 months that she'd been defeated, but Katie Humphries, the Olympic champion, back to her best.
Yeah, that loss, call it a loss, 3rd place last weekend, really upset her, fueled her fire, and now she's really looking to blow the competition away, not just win here.
Well, she leads by 26 hundredths of a second over Caroline Spani. Kathleen Martini in 3rd, the green flags of Saxony waving vigorously last week as she won in Saxony at the Altenburg track. And she was last year's winner here, as well as last week's winner in Altenburg. But, as you see, she's got a little bit of a battle on her hands to try and catch Kaylee Humphries. Quite a close top half dozen. Paula Walker, Sandra Kias is tied for 6th. And then from 8th to 15th, Kurt, 0.2 of a second. There's barely 500ths between any of these sleds. We can see a lot of changes here.
Yeah, you mentioned it just like that. The you know, there's now one sled in that group right there that's now looking at more than 500ths to catch the sled in front of him. And everybody's looking forward, trying to move up.
And 21 sleds started. Misha McNeil making her World Cup debut for Great Britain, 21st. Will not get a 2nd heat, only 20 fast go through. And they will go in reverse order of their 1st heat performance. Well, the snow is pretty light, big fat flakes, but the temperature, ambient temperatures maybe 6-7 degrees. It's certainly not settling. Well, air temperature at the top of the track says 0.8 degrees. It feels considerably milder than that. Little bit of snow in the track, Kurt, and you know, it might rob you of a few hundreds, but it's not going to be tense.
Yeah, I don't think it's what we saw in the 1st heat. The snowflakes were a lot thicker coming down and kind of staying in the track. The wind might have picked up just a hair, you know, blowing that snow around a little bit in the track, but for the most part, these are lighter flakes, and hopefully it won't make as much of a difference as it did in the 1st heat.
Christina Hengster of Austria there. Everybody else continuing to limber up and get themselves warm. You have a distinct countdown time in your head to when you're due on track. You've got to make sure that you are peaking exactly at the right moment.
It's always a little bit of a game trying to time when your sled is going to be off the hill. Of course, the 1st sled has the biggest advantage, knowing when they're going to be off right at the exact time on their watch. But the other sleds have to wait until it's, you know, cleared, the track is cleared, and it's their turn to go.
400-meter hurdler, double world champion Jana Pittman. You saw rehearsing her starts just like everybody else, trying to get those fast twitch fibers to work perfectly for them at the start of the race. Well, our fastest 20 sleds from Heat 1 go into Heat 2 in reverse order, and that means every sled that goes on the ice, apart from the very first, Oana Diacanu of Romania, will have a slight advantage over the current leader, unless there was a dead tie, of course, between them. And interestingly, the first 3 sleds were 8th, 6th and 5th in last year's Junior World Championships. And unfortunately, the girl who finished in the bronze medal position, Misha from Great Britain, didn't make it through into the 2nd heat on her first time down this winter Königssee track. Katie Humphries, though, no dramas for her. She finished on top of the pile. So we are getting our 2nd heat underway here in Königssee. Oana Diacanu and Christine Spataru of Romania are the first sled off the hill. Alongside me, Olympic brakeman Kurt Tomasevich. And Kurt, they started 20th, they finished 20th. That's probably no real surprise.
Yeah, 5:58 start time in the 1st heat, not real great. 5:59 here, just a little bit slower. We won't know if that's due to fatigue or what that is until the next few sleds go down, and we can tell if they improve or disprove their start time a little bit.
Of course, they will be the leaders at the bottom of the run because nobody else has had a second heat yet. Decent exit onto the straight.
Much better than her first heat. And that's what she's trying to do, is just improve from her first heat, learn from her mistakes, and get better on this track.
Well, the speed perhaps tells us that actually she's driving a little more than she did in the first run to control the sled a bit better. Good again through the S's.
Her speed was a little bit better coming out of Kreisel this heat than it was the last heat, even though she had a slower start time. So, once again, she's just driving a little bit better than she did the first heat.
Okay, 52.82, 200ths of a second better than her first run. Well, it's not a quantum leap forward, but she certainly tidied a few things up. She doesn't think so, though. I think that was a look of frustration. Something stuck in her mind as a mistake that crept in that she didn't want.
In the first heat, we talked about the unique part of this track was the 4 S curves, where there's very little straightaway between these curves. Here you can tell she's coming from S3 into S4. And that exit from that curve sets her up for, that bend away, which almost looks like a straightaway, but at the same time, the track is just curving to the right just a little bit without the advantage of a banked wall.
So Romania's Oana Gicanu leads. She's the Romanian 2 athlete. Started the season as Romania 1, but she's been overhauled by her younger teammate Maria Constantin, with Andrea Grecu behind her. And you can see the chiropractic clinic of Coach Paul Niagu being advertised on the sled. His son Andreas also competes for Romania, as Paul did in his youth. He's been living in Winterberg, Germany for about the last 20 years or so. Not quite sure where Ramalama Ding Dong comes in the Romanian canon of great pop hits, but with their Singer sled, they're away to a 5.53. Now that's a little quicker than their first heat, and again, the spur may be Kurt Tomasevich just to stay in front of their own teammates.
Yeah, we talked about in the first heat where that competition breeds success. They have the exact same start time as their teammates in the first heat. Their teammates in the second heat dropped back 100th while they improved by 500ths. So, she's really looking to move up. Still in the green, still got that lead.
Rattling along the walls on the straightaway. 1:18.0, exactly identical time to her teammate into the Kreisel. Now she comes 3200ths up. In the bottom it shows in the green all the way down. She's been in front on every time sector of this track.
Big bounce off the left wall through the end of the chicane, but still ahead by 0.3 of a second. Probably going to finish in 19th, 18th, maybe work her way up to 17th place. We'll see. But just gaining the experience on this track, getting ready to hopefully compete at World Championships. Looking at the glasses half full.
Yeah. So Paul Niagu with a little smile there. Both his girls improving their times in their second heat. And both, in fact, or certainly Romania 1, improving their start time as well. And that's exactly what you want.
Now, we talked about it also, coming out of S4 into that bend away. We call it bend away even though it looks straight up until this point right here. But, there's a lot of things that play into doing that section of the track well. And a lot of that is aerodynamics.
Rocking and rolling through the labyrinth. There's Maria on the left and Andrea on the right. All smiles as they go to the leader's box. Next up, a girl who was 5th in last year's Junior World Championships for Russia, Katerina Kostromina. Anna Pumatova behind her. Kostromina, the best placed Russian in last year's Junior Worlds. In fact, of the top 3 in last year's Junior World Championships, we've only seen Misha McNeil of Great Britain ever in World Cup action. Miriam Wagner and Stephanie Shurek, who have won 2 for Germany, can't break into the German squad.
The Russian program always looking to improve their start time. They're doing it by, a couple of different ways. They have some great track athletes. And at the same time, Anna in the back of this sled is, really strong, powerful athlete. Maybe not as fast, but definitely one of the strongest athletes on the circuit.
Starting 5.63, that's a 10th behind the Romanians who lead the race.
That theory just isn't working, apparently.
Yeah. 700ths behind. Little clatter on the wall is almost inevitable on the bend away. 1:18.5, a fraction quicker, half a kilometre. That's not even a third of a mile an hour quicker than the Romanian sled. Gap is closing. Yeah, she's gone. Well, 12-13 down the bottom there. It's caught a lot of people out this week, and that's the first in our race. 14 and 15, in fact, it is, isn't it? Down into the Z curve. It's that last little... It's like the end of the S's. It's such a quick transition. You flick from one corner to the other, and if one's wrong, the next one is wronger.
Yep. And we'll have to look at the replay, of course. Hopefully, as the athletes get out of the sled, they're okay. But, you know, you have to kind of guess that coming out of Kreisel was her first mistake, and that set her up to be late throughout the chicane and caused her to roll into the Ecovon corner.
Well, the doctor there hanging on to the sled. Pretty much know where most of the danger areas are on these tracks, and specifically here, you know, this track was built in the late 70s, so they've been doing this a long while. Making sure to check out the girls. And quite a lot of them in the junior sleds. Russia 2, Russia 3 may have a Burns vest on under their Lycra. Yikes. Yep.
Now we're going to look at the replay here, and as hopefully as we can tell, they come out of the exit of Kreisel. Right here coming into the chicanes. Very late in the right chicane, she really has to steer. It's coming to the left one, and then it just drives her right into the wall. Not enough time for the sled to come back down onto forerunners, as the Ecovon corner is right after the chicanes. Just rolls right up onto the right side. Now, you know, as crashes go, that's a pretty mild one. You know, nobody wants to end up on their helmets, but if you're going to have to crash, that's not so bad.
As Lake Placid veterans would say, she was zigging when she should have been zagging. And, you know, you always see this. You never want to see anybody crash. You know, everybody is waiting with bated breath to see the crew get out in one piece. And that's one of the things about this sport, Kurt, is you're not able to affect anyone else's race. It is just you versus the ice, and that's it. And that's what puts everybody in the same boat.
Exactly. There's no offense, there's no defense. You know, you're competing against yourself. You're competing against the track, but you're competing against the track with the other countries, you know. So, you know, you don't want to see your teammates, or excuse me, your competitors, you know, crash. That's just not the way you want to move up in the rankings at all. You want to see them do their best, and you just outdo them. Yeah. But you know, that's just part of the sport sometimes, and accidents happen.
Absolutely so. There is the bend away. That is the longest straight section of this track apart from the start area, and as you can see, straight doesn't really cover it. Maria Constantin on the right-hand side of your picture and Andrea Greco on the left-hand side. Romania 1 crew getting a little bit more time in the leaders box, and that's how you so often see them. They are bright and smiley girls the whole time. A little bit of extra TV exposure, why not? There's Kathleen Martini, hoping to get herself back to the top of the podium after winning here last year. Third after Heat 1. And there'll be a little bit of a track hold while the workers make sure there are no obvious big holes in the ice. Fast-moving sleds gradually start to make an impression on the ice, but when they're upside down, it's a little less gradual.
Now, this can be a little bit frustrating for Astrid Rajenovic and the Australians, too, as they're getting ready to go now, but they were forced to wait just a couple more minutes. And, you know, there's a very light snowfall coming down, so that, you know, it could pile up just a little bit. You know, it's just you get peaked at the right time, and then you're forced to wait just a couple minutes. So sometimes a little frustrating.
Astrid Rajenovic of Australia and Jana Pittman, her brand new rookie brakewoman. Twice 400-meter hurdles world champion, making her bobsleigh debut, her first ever week on ice. Little track hold.
5:48 push time in the first heat. 5:49 in the second heat, so apparently it didn't affect the start grooves at least that much.
The little track hold after the crash of the Russia 3 sled may have allowed the track workers more time to sweep the snow. They might actually have a slight advantage here in terms of running surface.
That's a great point.
You've got to spin a positive on everything, haven't you? When you stood at the top shivering, waiting in your Lycra, you've got to think positive. And 4 tenths up.
That's about the best bend away we've seen from, at least from a lot of these smaller nations. You know, she had really great speed going into Kreisel. took those taps through bend away, but that's the natural way to go.
Nice run through the S's as well. She's got a nice touch. She's really feeling the track in this second heat. She goes from 0.3 to 0.67 up in the run so far, and is accelerating away from the leaders. 52.25. That's nearly 0.2 of a second better than her first run. There's her husband and her backup brakewoman, Vukredjenovic, who'll be racing for Serbia this weekend, and Fiona Harrison, former British brakewoman and driver, who's also the one of the alternates on the Aussie sled.
That's a pretty good sign, because Ashford was only 0.05 of a second behind the Russians who are coming up next. But, we talked about coming out of S4. She's nice and low in her sled, coming through straight, takes that little tap, but, that's okay. Then the tap on the right side. In order to go into the next curve properly, she has to take one more tap that would have been on her left side.
Well, Jana Pittman, her brakewoman, looks a little bit stiff. Talking to Craig Pickering, another sprinter who joined the British team. He had a run down in training. He was very stiff the next day. Bobsleigh does things, Kurt Tomasevich, to a person's body that other sports don't, and you've got to acclimatise.
Yeah, you would think that, a lot of these track and field athletes come to our sport, thinking it's, push that sled off the top of the hill as fast as you can, and that's the end of it. But there's so much more your body has to endure. Going down this track, it takes a huge toll on your adrenaline, on your nervous system, on your skeletal system. Everything just gets really beat up, and it makes it very difficult and something you have to adapt to as an athlete, in addition to just being able to push fast.
Nastasia Tambov-Seva of Russia with Ludmila Udobkina behind her. 5:46 getaway, couple of hundred slower than their first heat.
Still in the green, but only by 0.05 of a second.
I think Astrid Radjenovic had a really nice looking run in the Aussie sled. Russia needs a good bend away.
Sled breaking away just a little bit, but for the most part, that's pretty decent. But fell behind just now. Now she's in the red.
1:18.7. The Aussies were a full kilometre an hour quicker.
The S section was the difference.
Well, now the gap is going to start to grow. If you lose speed through the Kreisel, you find it very hard to gain here. 0.09 of a second. She's crawled back 1/100th. Could be close. Single digits, 0.03 of a second, but the Aussies move up. Well, we talked about the gaps from 8th to 15th. There are a couple of other very close battles in the field. Astrid Radjenovic was 500s behind Tambov-Seva after the first heat. Comes in 300s in front.
Yeah, we're going to see a number of close battles come up here in the next 10 sleds or so. But the S-curves was just what cost her just a little bit. 0.03 of a second, that can come from anywhere, but Astrid had a very nice S-curve section. Anastasia doing maybe just a little bit too much driving. See the runner tips in the front of the sled, doing a lot of steering right there.
So she slips a spot. Anastasia Tambov-Seva. Well, next up, we get into this really tight battle, really to get into the top 10. And Jen Cacchetti and Kate O'Brien from 15th spot could easily do it with a tidy run. Jennifer with those goggles. And almost every Canadian driver now seems to have adopted. Kurt Tomasevich, they started 5:36. That was the 8th quickest start. So it was not the start so much that let them down, just a couple of mistakes in the drive.
5:38 start time again this second heat. So they started with a 0.3 of a second lead plus a little bit more additional velocity. Now they've extended it to 0.32 of a second. So now it's just up to Jennifer just to drive down the track. Keep that velocity, don't make any major mistakes.
Only in her second season as a driver, part of which last year she went back to being a brakewoman for Kaylee Humphries. They won the World Championships in Lake Placid. 1:17.7, that is the slowest speed we've seen into the Kreisel.
Yeah, she's going to have to just hope that she had, well, that's going to be, it's going to go away right away. She's only 0.04 of a second now, coming from 0.3 of a second earlier. She's in the red.
She was neat through the S's at the bottom of the labyrinth, but she's gone from 400s up to 5 behind.
She's going to fall back 2 places here.
Wow. 52.53, the Aussies move up again. Jana Pittman standing in the leader's box, shivering in lycra, not something, again, that track and field athletes are familiar with.
Yeah, once again, that's just another thing. Your body has to adapt to being able to run in cold weather as well.
Okay, so Jennifer Cacchetti and Kate O'Brien walk away from their sled, disappointed with that, Kurt.
It takes a little bit of a tap. Let's see, coming out of how to get some.
That was into Brenner, I think. They're into the Kreisel.
Right into Kreisel, yeah, okay. And that killed a lot of her speed. You mentioned she had the slowest speed, 117, compared to almost 120 for Astrid.
Okay, girls, I'm saying right now, I promise never to buy you pizza the night before a race again. That's clearly what kinked their day for them. Next up, Christina Hengster and Alexandra Teuschi of Austria. Well, again, you know, only 18th fastest at the start, really needs some speed there, but she drove herself up a few spots into 14th, despite really a catalogue of errors. She is definitely better as a driver than their start would allow.
Yeah, and their start, again, you mentioned, isn't the strongest part of their team's strengths, but you know, usually Christina's used to being at least in the top 10 and oftentimes in the top 6 in the last 2 years.
Well, Hengster currently lying 4th in the World Cup rankings, has not been lower than 8th this year, best of 4th in Lake Placid.
Still, 5:52 start time, 100 slower than the first heat.
Certainly not going to win any medals in a push competition. Let's see what she can produce. 2100s up at the start, down to 13, and that is the legacy of that start. Onto the straight, though. Oof.
Quite a few taps, and you can tell those taps aren't exactly at the same time. The front bunk and the rear bunk are hitting the wall at different times when you hear the tap-tap instead of one just tap, keeping the sled straight.
Well, the bunks are those little bumpers that sit out from the sled at the front and at the rear. And there to protect the sled and its steering gear, its runners.
And as she came out of Kreisel, the clock turned red. She's now behind by 0.04 of a second.
And going further back down, she ties.
Wow.
She found something in that final corner to help Austrian coach just feel a little bit less disappointed. But the Aussies are still in the lead with 13 sleds to go. So far, Astrid Radivinovic has picked herself up 4 spots.
Yeah, she didn't have a great bend away, but she was able to make up some time in those last 2 curves, which are uphill. And if you make a mistake in those last 2 curves, you know, that's pretty critical. But she must have driven them very well in order to come back.
If you post your best result of the season in Lake Placid, you know you can drive.
Yeah, you can see here in bend away how the bunks on the same side are hitting the wall at different times, meaning that the sled is skidding sideways.
A tap is one thing. A tap-tap does very different things to the sled. We have joint leaders then, Australia and Austria. Almost inseparable in the dictionary and completely inseparable in time. Olga Stulneva of Russia then, Russia's last chance of a top 10 finish. She had their best first heat run. She was 13th. Malcolm Lloyd with the dark hair on the right-hand side, encouraging his girls to a big start. Yulia Timofeeva behind the brakes. And again, Kurt, how you get this sled moving is so much part of the speed that you convey into it, and that's something that track and field athletes will have no clue about to start with.
Yeah, there's a huge amount of technique that goes into pushing this sled. You know, when you come down to 100ths of a second over a 5-second span, you know, every little thing matters. You want all your power, all your velocity moving horizontal, and it's easy to waste a lot of energy going vertical as you run.
Nice exit out of the Schlangengruber. 3800s up on our joint leaders. Little wavy run down the straightaway, but not too much to worry about. Speed isn't great.
A couple waves through Kreisel, but seems to be controlling the pressures for the most part pretty well.
2/10. No major knocks down through the lower labyrinth.
Yeah, her teammates struggled at the end of that chicane section, but she seems to be controlling this very well.
Down to 1500ths of a second. She should hang on.
A big skid coming to that uphill section, but only lost 200ths of a second.
So the Aussies and the Austrians both move out of the leaders box, and Russia move in at least temporarily. And I know that Jana Pittman for Australia was beating herself up about not being able to get anything like the speed into the sled that she hoped for.
You can see as she drives through the 360-degree Kreisel curve, sled catches that pressure just a little bit there, causes her to go a little high. Not always a bad thing. Sometimes you want to take that little bit of pressure and not oversteer. But that exit of that curve, she wanted to be a little bit smoother, not hang on the wall as long as she did.
The Russians have the lead. And good day for Australia's Astrid Radivinovic and Jana Pittman, definitely. 2012 World Championships, Lake Placid to St. Moritz. for 2013 Worlds. That is the target for Anja Schneider-Heinze and Stephanie Schneider. Schneider winning last week, breaking Kathleen Martin in Altenburg. Now Schneider, third fastest start, 5:28, only 12th at the end of the track. Mile of ice makes a big difference.
You know, I'm sure she's disappointed sitting in 12th place right now, but only 200ths to 11th place, another 200ths to 10th place, another 100th to 9th place. So, you know, this being a German track, she's been down this track hundreds, thousands of times, and I really expect her to be able to want to make the most jumps in the second heat.
Well, she was disappointed with her result in Altenburg as well. She doesn't really need to have two duff runs on German tracks. 1:18.0, well, that's not setting the world on fire, is it?
No, I really expected her to have a little bit better section through Bendaway. Still only 0.12 of a second ahead. She really hasn't gained anything on the sleds behind her.
Rubbing the sled so many times down the wall on the Bendaway has cost her time. She now opens up a little bit because she had a good run through the lower labyrinth. She gets out of Echo, 2700ths up on the Russians, 52.12. So a little smile from Yulia Timofeeva as Anja Schneider-Heinze and Stephanie Schneider move into the lead. And as you said, Kurt Tomasevich, this is a very, very tight pack. You know, 500 or 600ths might move her up 3 or 4 places.
You know, the start is her specialty, and I really expected her to drop a little bit time in her start. Instead, she dropped a couple hundreds. But coming through the S's, S2 into S3, excuse me, S3 into S4, not a bad transition. Very smooth right there. But coming out of S4, maybe hung on just a little bit too high, and that sent her to the right wall.
You know, we're talking about fractions of a second in the steering makes such a big difference. And there is Anja. She has the lead with 11 sleds to go. And around her, all around her, a lot of drivers who you really think probably could tidy up their act a little, first of whom may be Jamie Grubel, first out of the hill in the first run with Emily Azevedo. A 5:30 start. These two girls will be looking to improve on that. And for Jamie, our driver, to try and get a little tidier run. 29-year-old from Lake Placid, New York.
Yeah, you mentioned that they were the first off the hill in the first heat and maybe had a battle a little bit of the elements because they were kind of the snowplow as they came through this section. They pushed a 5:30 in the first heat, 5:29 in the second heat, so they were one of the only sleds so far to be able to improve their start time. But coming into that first curve, Jamie came into it just a little bit early there and kind of caused the back end to skid, as well as the S curve right there. So hopefully that didn't kill any of their start velocity. Well, it did. 400ths of a second back now already.
400s up to 400s behind Anja Schneider-Heinze. Little better run perhaps on the Bendaway. 1:18.2, fraction quicker for Jamie Grubel. She was only 200s in front of the German girl from the first heat. This is still very makeable. That was a good run through the lower labyrinth.
Yeah, only 600ths of a second back, so she stopped the bleeding quite a bit. Waiting for that clock to turn green. Now she's lost a little bit more, 1500ths of a second.
Those gaps are so tiny, if you blink in the wrong place, you'll go up or down 500 or 600s. Anja Schneider-Heinze continues to lead, 52.33 for Jamie Grubel. And that run some nearly quarter of a second slower than her first heat, so she'll be disappointed with that.
Yeah, I'm sure Jamie's a little disappointed, but you know, at the same time, the only sled that has jumped ahead of her is a German sled on a German track. So Jamie could keep her head up right here. And hopefully some of the next sleds that come down, she can jump ahead of with that German sled.
A little skid
here's right early on. This is going to the first S, and you see the sled start to break away to the left just a little bit. And then that means the back end of the sled is really going to whip up. And Emily in the back of the sled is going to feel a little bit of a beating coming back quick into a high-pressure curve.
Yeah, cling on tight. Well, there you're only doing 50+ miles an hour, but still the G-force is really acting. You know, this is an old track built for old, slow sleds, Kurt Tomasevich, and that means the G-forces are pretty instant when you get onto these tight corners.
Yeah, that makes it pretty difficult. You know, the sleds are moving much faster than when the track was built, and so the profiles of the curves don't necessarily match well with how fast these new aerodynamic sleds are going.
Start record in Heat 1 for Alana Myers and Asia Evans, 5:22. Can they beat their first getaway?
I think they can get to the teens if they really start. Wow. 5:20, just missed. That's great.
Well, you know, we talked about Asia and Lolo Jones, Tiana Madison, who raced in the US races. and the Canadian races for American bobsledding. These girls have brought a whole injection of new pace into the team.
Yeah, we talked about how really fast these girls can run, but you know, there's a lot to be said for how strong these girls have to be, and Asia is a really strong athlete.
118 kilometers an hour. We're not seeing the 120s that we saw in the first heat from some of the quickest sleds, but it looked like a better run down the bend away, and that's a better lower labyrinth section as well from Alana Myers.
Yeah, 28 hundredths of a second ahead so far.
Well, bearing in mind that she was 500ths in front of Anja Schneider-Heinze in heat 1, she's still 2/10 up, and 1700ths, a 51.99. That is a good run. That would have been top 6 in the first heat.
Yeah, Alana had some great runs during practice, and she was really laying down some smokers. First heat wasn't quite one of those smokers.
Look at the smile.
We'll see how the second heat goes. You know, she had a great run there, so maybe she can move up some spots there.
Big smile from Brian Scheimer. He was watching that on the TV like that.
Asia, that strong, powerful athlete, really fast. 5:20 start time. You know, I hate to say it, but some of the men might not be able to push 5:20 in the two-man race come tomorrow. So they're putting a little bit of pressure on the guys.
Well, listen, you see an athlete who, with Alana, who's a strong starter as well, is helping get that speed. You know, she's 6 races into her career. She's got to have more potential, still untapped, hasn't she? There she is on the left.
Her and Alana make a great team.
Next up, in 9th place after Heat 1, Elfie Willemsen and Hannah Marion. Summer Olympian, the former track cyclist on the back of Elfie's Belgian sled. Just the one Belgian women's sled here this weekend. Now, they started 5:48, only 16th quickest, but clearly had a good drive because they came down 9th fastest.
Yeah, I would have to say that this might be one of the surprises in the top 10. She's, you know, usually battling for 14th, 15th, 16th place out of 18, 20 sleds. So for her to be in 9th place, you know, she may be feeling some pressure, some things you might consider insignificant.
Well, career best result of 10th place last week. Now, that was in a very much depleted women's field in Altenburg, just 13 sleds. Nevertheless, in the history books, it'll still be 10th spot. 5:49 getaway, right where they were in the first run.
She's really going to have to drive well to stay ahead of Anja.
Well, she's not going to stay in front of Alana Myers, starting over a quarter of a second behind her. She should, by rights, be 3/4 of a second down, all things being equal. 1:18.5, quicker than anybody so far. No, we've had a 1:19.5, in fact, from the Aussies, so that's how good a run Astrid Radjenovic had. Closing the gap.
She's going to have a tough time keeping up. She's 3/500ths of a second back.
She's bringing that gap down. 3,700, so she slips. It's only the 6th quickest run of the heat. She slips down into 4th place behind Jamie Grubel, Anja Schneider-Heinze, and our leader, Alana Myers. And that's what we expected in this tight group of sleds. 8 sleds covered by 0.2 of a second. But look, to get there, they are again meeting their targets, ticking their boxes for Olympic qualification standards.
Yeah, each country can have their own Olympic standards qualifications, you know, in addition to the IOC standards that we all have to meet. So I'm not sure what their standard was, but appears like they met it.
They've guaranteed themselves a top 12 finish behind Alana Myers. They currently lie 4th with 8 sleds to go, and that clearly has delighted the Belgians. Still snow blustering around this Königssee track as we are in the second and deciding heat of our 7th race in the Women's Bobsleigh World Cup. Next up at the top of the ice, USA 3, best of the American sleds in Heat 1. Jasmine Fenlater from New Jersey and Lolo Jones on the back handles. Head down and driving. Lolo's got leg speed, that's for sure.
5:36 start time, a couple hundred slower than the first heat. You know, but Jasmine, again, just didn't have a great week of practice. But she did drive very well in the first heat. You know, she lost a little bit of velocity coming from 6th place to, a rank of 6 to a rank of 7, and then drove, and then to 9, and then drove back to 8th place. So she was driving well toward the bottom part of this track. Let's see if she can do the same on this run.
Stitching it all together is what's going to be important. 2300s away at the S's, only 2400s away into the Kreis. Oh, she gets close, and goodness me, very rocky down into the Z curve.
That was the danger spot that the Russians had, excuse me.
Yeah, she crashed there in practice as well, and that drops her behind Alana Myers, and in fact, behind Anja Schneider-Heinze as well, vanishes from sight. Asia Evans and Alana Myers lead the race. Heart in the mouth moment there for Lolo Jones.
Yeah, Jasmine's going to want to look forward to going to Eagles next week, that's for sure.
Well, they got away with that, but caught her out in training, nearly caught her again. But any run you don't use your helmet, that's a good run, right?
Yeah, she drove most of the track very well. As you can see, just a little bit late, hanging on to that exit, and that sent her late through the chicanes, really high on that last chicane. Wow, that back runner seemed to almost float from one curve to the other. Saw
Lolo out of the saddle and her head way above the cowl as she just got thrown bodily around in the sled. You know, Kurt, people might be surprised. You don't have a seatbelt. You're just hanging on to little metal handles in the sled. And, you know, 5 times your own body weight trying to throw you out.
Yeah, it's a lot of it just has to do with gravity and whether you can, you know, use that G-force to hold you into the sled sometimes. And, you know, there's a trick to being able to ride fast, too, as a brakeman. Just kind of being loose and become part of the sled.
Paula Walker, Great Britain, tied for 6th after the first heat. Kelly Denyer behind her after Jill Cook was injured in last week's crash. Talking about what the brakewoman does, Jill was trying to butt the sled back uphill to get it onto its runners as they were rolling over. Have your wits about you even when you're bent double in the back of the sled.
5:39 start time in both heats for Paula, so she was able to stay consistent.
She dropped out of a top 3 position last week. She's trying to get herself into the top 6 here. And she's back in front.
Into the green, yep.
Good speed as well, 1:186.
This is where Jasmine had a little bit of trouble coming through the chicanes, but very smooth right here.
Still in front, but it is fractional gaps. Can she use the height to get a good exit and stay in front of Alana Myers? She's gone from 500s up to a 1/10 of a second. It could still be close. She does. She eases away a fraction, a 52.16. And Coach Pete Gunn is happy with that. Well, that guarantees Paula Walker a top 6 finish, potentially.
Yeah,
she was tied for 6 in
for
Heat
6th
1.
place, yep.
Yeah,
so.
Still 6 to go. Kurt Tomasevich, we talked about the mental strength that you have to use to come back after a big crash like last week.
Yeah, and definitely, and especially being tied coming into this race, and for the medal position, or excuse me, the award position, 6th place, and everybody wants to get that award. Being tied, you know, that's it's got to handle a lot of pressure, and Paula drove great there, did a really good job.
Kelly Denyer beside her. Paula Walker and Alana Myers offers her congratulations to the Brits as they lead. 6 to go here. Sandra Kyriasis of Germany with Berit Viaca behind her. 8 times a World Cup champion, an Olympic champion, a multiple world champion in women's bobsleigh. She's the Michael Schumacher, she's the Dale Earnhardt of this sport. She has won more things than any other woman in the history of the sport. She is no longer the benchmark, perhaps, that you could probably now say is Kaylee Humphries, but she is still to be feared on any ice track on the planet.
Yeah, you might not expect a great start time here, maybe in the low 540s, but you expect her to be able to move up a couple spots because of her driving ability. 5:41 start time.
She really doesn't make many mistakes. You don't often get scraps off the table of Sandra Kyriasis, and she's already 100th up on our current leader, Paula Walker, with whom she tied in the first heat.
Yeah, their start time's very similar, only a couple hundredths apart. But Sandra knows every little secret to every curve, even that first curve, the S's, able to drive really well right here.
Well, in the replays, we'll see her entry onto the straightaway. The control was great. She's got better speed than anybody apart from Australia so far.
Yeah, just extending that lead 1600s. It's probably going to be over 3/10 as she ends up coming across the finish line.
119.6, 75 miles an hour nearly at the bottom. Sandra Kyriasis pulling away. This is where she should have been in the first heat. 51.80 slide. Her first heat was a 51.81. That is consistency from the German woman. She takes the lead from Paula Walker and Kelly Denyer of Great Britain.
Yeah, she's only 600ths of a second coming from from 4th place coming into this heat. So, you know, it's going to be likely that she'll be able to move up a couple spots, maybe to the bronze medal position.
Well, we saw her move from 5th to 2nd last week in Altenburg with a great second run. And there's Berit Viaca, her long-time cohort.
Out of S4, a little bit of steering at the beginning, but man, that just sent the sled straight coming through that that bend away, threads the needle there, takes a little bit of tap right here, which is, again, the natural thing to do. Tap
like
on the right.
That's the experience of having done this hundreds and hundreds of times.
Yep, you know, and I'm sure a number of team trial races were here in addition to all the World Cup and Europa Cup races she's done.
Well, listen, a couple of big surprises in our top half dozen. Maybe not big surprises, but great first run from Esme Campos, former women's world champion. Behind her, Nikki Minicello, coaching them now. And the Flying Lion on the front of the sled and the Flying Doctor driving it. Esme Campos and Judith Vis for the Netherlands.
Great push technique from Judith in the back of the sled. You know, kept her heels really low to the ice, really drove horizontally, and that results in pretty good start time. 5:34. That's pretty good for that team.
Well, that's the second fastest so far in the competition in this second heat. She had a really smooth run in the first race. Got those S's sorted out and a good exit onto the bend away too.
A little bit of fishtail, but nothing too serious. She has 0.14 of a second. Pretty decent speed, 119.3.
Wow. She could end up staying in front of Sandra Kyriasis. The Labyrinth will decide it. Does she thread the eye of the needle? Not quite.
A little bit of a bump there, but 0.13 of a second to play with. Still in the green.
Well, the energy that throws you up in the air is taken out of the sled going forward, so she's got a tiny margin.
0.08 of a second coming across the finish line.
It's going to be a fraction.
Oh, 1/100th of a second.
100th
wow.
behind. Well, that still guarantees the Netherlands another top 6 finish, and I think that is the third that they needed this season to confirm that they will qualify for the Olympic Games. Their local NOC, National Olympic Committee, I think it was 3 top 6 finishes, and I think that's her third this season.
Yeah, I'm not sure if she realizes it yet. You know, she shakes her head in disappointment at 1/100th of a second, but you know, the mistake might have been right here, coming from the second or first chicane into the second, hits that left wall, and I don't know, that's could easily have been that 1/100th of a second. That
was it. Well, and more. Well, congratulations to her. In fact, that's her 4th top 6 finish. She's had a 5th and 2 4th places as well this year. Well, next up, the colours of Switzerland, former junior world champion Fabienne Meyer, with Michelle Huvela behind her. 2008 junior world title went to Meyer. And they lie 700ths out of the medals. There's Sandra Kyriasis on the left, Berit Vjaka on the right, our current leaders. And they might be looking at another medal this week.
.544 start time in the first heat and a 5:43 start time this heat. That's the 10th fastest so far, so not a great start time. But just like in the first heat, Fabienne really drove well, and that's what she's hoping to do here. They went from 13th fastest the first heat down to 4th place.
They're going to need to stay in front of Sandra Kyriasis. Again, good control onto the bend away, rattles the wall though. Those 300s will have gone. She'll be in the red into the Kreisel. Now she's got to produce something. 119.3, quicker than the German girl.
It's really tough because Sandra was so good coming through that bend away. Now they're tied, dead even.
Not quite as smooth, perhaps, through the Labyrinth as Kyriasis.
Just falls into the red now.
Dropping behind, but by how much? By 100th of a second. I can't believe it. Another 100th of a second. Could still come back to it, but a rocky final corner means it won't. 51.90. And Kyriasis is getting closer to a medal. And Fabienne Meyer, 400s behind Sandra Kyriasis, not second. She's now 3rd with 3 to go.
Yeah, with Esme only 100th behind. Excuse me, behind Sandra Kyriasis. Yeah, sorry. You know, Fabienne just did fall back into 3rd place.
Well, again, top 6 finish. It's a big day when you get that in this illustrious company. The tantalising prospect, perhaps, of a top 3 finish is what was really taunting her. 3 sleds to go in snowy Königssee, Bavaria, and 1 German remains. It's the woman who won last year. It's the woman who won last week, Kathleen Martini and Janina Tischer. It's also the woman who has the all-time track record here. She's driven down this track faster than any other woman in history. And the most successful ever women's bobsleigh pilot's on the left of your shot, Sandra Kyriasis. She leads now this battle of the Germans. I guarantee there'll be 2 races that Martini wanted to win this year. Altenburg, her home track in Saxony, tick that box. And the other one will be St. Moritz in 2 weeks' time. Can she win here as well?
5:41 start time. 100th faster than the first heat. Just like her two German teammates that were able to move up a few spots in the second heat, Kathleen's hoping to do the same.
Well, the Germans started 3rd, 5th and 8th. They had a lot of snow early on in the run, or perhaps a little more than some of the later runners. Not a bad straightaway. Good speed, fastest.
119.8, yeah, fastest so far we've seen this second heat.
We saw 120s in the first heat. 1300s up. She's still only got the lead that she had when she sat down, and she's had to work hard to get that much.
Very nice coming into the uphill portion of the track. 1300s ahead.
Still only 1300s and 1200 to the line. 51.81. She takes the lead from Sandra Kyriasis with 2 to go. May just have pushed her teammate out of the medals. Kyriasis came down 51.80. Martini 51.81 in this run. How much identical are they?
Yeah, and I wouldn't write them off as not medaling yet. You know, Sandra might be in 4th place if things go as predicted or as they're supposed to go. But you know, Caroline Spani coming up next, you know, a little bit inexperienced in this 2nd position.
We see lots of green flags of Saxony, the Kathleen Martini fan club. See the French bobsled men's crew down there watching as well. There's Martini bouncing up and down like a spring chicken.
The second half of that chicane section right there, not the smoothest, but pretty decent compared to what some of the sleds we've seen so far.
Kathleen Martini and the dark-haired Janina Tischer lead. They are guaranteed a medal with 2 sleds to go. Biggest heat of her life as a driver. Double junior world champion as a brakewoman, Caroline Spani, thinking her way down into the first corner here. Second after heat 1. Can she hold her position?
Now they use the combination of a great start time and a great drive to come across the line at first place in the first heat. 5:33 in the first heat, 5:34 in the second heat, so not so bad.
Well, top 5 starting in the world. Now it's all about what Spani can do.
61 kilometers an hour going into the first S-curve.
Best momentum we've seen, opening up an advantage on Martini. Good control onto the straightaway. She's still in front. Little skid. That's the 10th gone, and another one coming down into Brenner.
Pretty high through Brenner. 118.3, yeah, almost a kilometer an hour slower.
1.6 kilometers an hour down, and she's gone behind. Still in with a chance of a medal. At the moment, though, she slipped from 1st down to 3rd place. It is so close at the top. Can she hang on?
She's riding a little high, 2300ths of a second. She could fall back a number of places if she's not careful here.
Drifted away. She's out, down in 5th position. Kathleen Martini will take at least a silver. Sandra Kyriasis at least a bronze. And unfortunately, the inexperience of Caroline Spani perhaps just costing her more than she wanted there. Well, Kurt, that was half a second slower than her first trip down this track.
Yeah, and you have to think maybe the pressure got to her just a little bit. I mentioned she's just not used to being this late off in the second heat and really hit that right wall pretty hard. Now, the natural thing is to take a tap, but she hit it pretty nose on.
It's easy to say, drive it like you drove in first heat when there was no pressure, but mentally, again, you can't accept that there's no pressure. There is always the pressure of the medal being in your hand and trying to hang on to it.
Yeah, just moving your hands millimeters at a time while you're going, you know, 80, 100, 120 kilometers an hour is a difficult thing.
Our final driver knows a lot about handling the pressure. She stood at the top of the track in her home Olympics with a lead, looking to take the gold medal. How much more pressure can you possibly imagine? Kaylee Humphries leads after heat 1 here. Germany 1-2. Martini and Kyriasis at the bottom of the hill, waiting to see whether they'll go gold, silver, or silver bronze, and only Kaylee Humphries can decide that.
5:27 in the first heat, 5:26, only 100th off the previous start record, other than what Alana and Asia did today from the United States. So really great start time, 61 kilometers an hour.
Good momentum, little bump into the first corner, but she's already nearly half a second up onto the bend away.
Very straight coming through there. just takes more of a tap compared to what Spani did the sled before, who almost hit it nose on. 119.7 kilometers an hour.
Only Kathleen Martini went a whisker faster. This is a run to gold for Kaylee Humphries. She's out of the labyrinth. That's the last potential tripping point. Now she just needs to keep the sled, give it its head, 4/10 up still. She's won 5 races this year. She wins race number 6 of the season in race number 7. Wow. Yep. Kaylee Humphries is back to her best. She never wants to win by 100th. She wants to win by a second if she can. She wants never to be cruising.
Yeah, I think Kaylee got some rage in her, and she really let it loose there after getting a bronze medal last week. You know, I think that may be the best thing for her going into World Championships in 2 weeks.
Well, do you know what? If she'd won 8 races out of 8, she'd still have been in good form, because you just can't knock this girl down. Right now, she is in absolutely the form of her life. Even going into the Vancouver Games, she was not as strong, as composed, as fast as she is now.
Yeah, everything just is really clicking for Kaylee. You know, great pushes, great equipment, and her driving has been remarkable. It's really hard to find fault in a lot of things that she does.
Success breeds success. And Chelsea Valois on the back of the sled behind her is back on the top step of the podium again. They have really gelled as a team.
Yeah, we pay a lot of attention to the brakeman at the push, but watch Kaylee push as well. Really powerful, and what I really like is she doesn't shift her body on the driver's push bar, slide over to her right. She loads into the sled without moving her hands.
It's a well-oiled machine. She was a great brake woman and has turned into a world-beating driver. Our Olympic champion wins again. She claims her 6th gold medal of the season. And there won't be a single downbeat face in the Canadian team this afternoon. Well, it's hard to fault a slide like that. You know, on any track, there's always going to be a couple of tiny little errors. But Kaylee Humphries could probably give lessons to the Germans on how to drive down this track. We'll hear from the top 3 in just a few moments, but there is your result. Paula Walker, Kelly Denyer just out of the top half dozen. Caroline Spani drifting away from the medals. Martini and Kyriasis moving strongly up the order behind the winner.
So, und ich würde sagen, wir versuchen mal das erste Mal hier am Königssee eine durchgehende Welle. Wir fangen hier oben an bei mir, die Hände nach vorne und sie geht ein bisschen runter zum See. Und die Hände nach vorne, okay! Jawohl, dann gleich nochmal, und die Hände nach vorne, okay! So, ich könnte jetzt gleich los und warten uns auf die Siegerin aus Kanada. Auf Kelly Humphries, die muss sich noch umziehen. So, meine sehr verehrten Damen und Herren, Ladies and Gentlemen, FIBT Bob Weltcup, hier seid ihr von Wissmann am Königssee. Erster Platz, the winner, representing Germany and representing Canada, Kaylee Humphries and Chelsea Valois. Platz 2. Kathleen Martini und Janine Fischer! Und Platz 3, ebenfalls aus Deutschland, representing Germany, Sandra Kyriasis und David Bieler! Die Blumen werden übergeben von Andreas Straußwetter, Vizepräsident des Weltverbandes FIBT.
Welcome back to snowy Königssee in Bavaria, where Olympic champion Kaylee Humphries is back to her winning ways. Another Olympic champion alongside me here in the booth, Kurt Tomasevich. She might be a third of the way to a big cash prize with that result.
Yeah, finishing on top of the leaderboard here in Königssee is a really exciting feat, because if you win here in Königssee, you win in Eagles, and then win in the last World Cup race in Sochi, you win what we call the triple trophy, the FIBT triple trophy, which is then splitting a jackpot of 100,000 euros. So, Kaylee's on her way.
Yep, and that could be a big payday heading into, well, I say the holidays or the end of season. And it was another flawless run, really strong start from these two girls, Kaylee Humphries, Chelsea Valois, and two great drives to lead the Germans at home. Yeah,
both runs were textbook. You really can't find a whole lot better where she could improve. Maybe drop a couple hundredths in the start, maybe find a hundredth or two on some of those curves, but for the most part, that was pretty flawless.
Great work from the Eurotech sled, great work from the Canadian athletes, all gelling very nicely, setting her up as perhaps our title favourite as we head to the World Championships in St. Moritz in a couple of weeks' time. Well, let's hear from our top three. They're down in the snowy finish area with John Morgan.
Andreas Trautberger, president of the German Bobsleigh and Skeleton Federation, giving away the flowers here today. Now to our winners. 6 of the 7 times this season, and we'll go over to the bronze medal team of Team Kariasis. Good second run, Sandra.
Yeah, we had a good first run too, and a little too much snow maybe.
Well, congratulations. A bronze medal is always great. Congratulations, Barrett. Now we go to the silver medal. Kathleen, good 2 runs?
Oh yeah, good 2 runs. The second was better than the first. Yeah, we're happy. So it's the first race this season for Janine. So I'm happy to be on the podium, and I think she's too happy. So we're great here.
Maybe she's your good luck charm.
Yeah.
Congratulations. 6 out of 7 times. You two ladies have been gold medalists so far this season, and this is a very difficult track to drive. But boy, you had 2 really good runs.
Yeah, I'm really happy with my runs today. I'm really happy with our starts as well. That's probably the most consistent and the best starts we've had. So really great to come back after, not winning last week. We learned a lot, and to bust out a win this week, I mean, I'm happy.
Congratulations again. Great performance.
Kurt Tomasevich, only the track record starting of Alana Myers and Asia Evans bested the Olympic champion, and she just drove up a storm. She really is in great form at the end of the season in sight.
Yeah, the momentum is in her favor now. Maybe a little hiccup last week, but she got that momentum right back. Heading into Eagles next week, which is a starter's track. Drivers really just rely on that great start. So, she's in great shape going into St. Moritz for the World Championships.
Well, you can see all the action from the Eagles races and, of course, from St. Moritz and Sochi at the end of the season. And don't forget, you can catch up with everything you need to know about bobsled and skeleton on FIBT.com. For Kurt Tomasevich, John Morgan and the rest of the crew, this is Martin Haven saying goodbye.